Good evening, members of the public. Nice to see you all here this evening. And can I welcome you, and can I also welcome anyone watching on YouTube? Item 1, apologies for absence. We have a full house, so no apologies. Oh yes, Councillor Ritchie. Sorry, Councillor Ritchie is being substituted by Councillor Hensman. Sorry, Councillor Hensman. I'm only talking to you a few minutes ago. I should have remembered that. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? No. Item 3 is going to take a little bit longer. Item 3, minutes of previous meetings. I have minutes of the 1st of November, 15th of November, 29th of November and the 24th of November. I'm going to take them individually. I'll start with the 1st of November. Is it your wish that I sign the 1st of November as a true record? Someone, are you moving and seconding? Thank you. All those in favour that I sign them? Thank you very much. Next one is the 15th of November. Is everyone happy with those? You're moving them? Second thing, thank you. All those in favour of them being a true record? Thank you. The next one is the 29th of November. Can I have a mover and seconder for those ones? Thank you. All those in favour, I sign them as true record. Thank you, members. And the final one is the 24th of January. Can I have a mover and seconder? Thank you. Thank you very much. All those in favour, I sign these as a true record. Thank you. That brings us to item 4, public question time. We have no general questions. Those wishing to make a statement, make it prior to each application as we consider the application. So we come to item 5, planning applications. The first application this evening is application 2-1, 03214 REM, land opposite Sandy Acres, Long Green, Cressing. And I do have speakers on this item. The first person wishing to make a statement, and actually the only person wishing to make a statement, is Miss Paige Harris. Miss Harris, would you like to come to the table, make your statement, and can I remind you have 3 minutes?
Thank you for the opportunity to address committee this evening. Members will be aware this site benefits from outline planning permission that secures the principle of residential development for the site, fixes the location and layout of the main highway network, which comprises 2 new roundabouts, Central Spine Road and realignment of Braintree Road, and its associated footpath and cycleways to the surrounding area, and over £1 million of contributions to enhance local sports, allotments, healthcare infrastructure and educational facilities. The application you are being asked to support tonight relates solely to the details of the scale, appearance, landscaping and layout of the 250 new homes. We are mindful of the tree removal in the already approved highway network, and therefore our proposals have ensured as much of the remaining high-quality existing vegetation is retained within the proposed scheme. We have also made sure the provision of significant areas of landscaping, greatly in excess of the policy requirements, are central to our proposals, so the development is sympathetic to the wider countryside. As part of this commitment, we are proposing 343 new trees, new hedgerows, 4.3 hectares of open space, areas of ecological enhancement including wildflower planting and tree-lined streets. Care has been taken to ensure the 100 homes to be delivered as affordable rent and shared ownership tenures will be pepper-potted throughout the development to create an inclusive community and provides a mix that addresses identified housing needs in the locality. In preparing this application for presentation to yourselves, we have sought to work hard alongside the Council and other stakeholders to ensure both the development and the properties themselves are of a high quality design, which both respects and takes cues from the local vernacular. Without almost any exceptions, every amendment that has been requested of us by the Council has been made. These properties are also designed to achieve high standards to ensure residents will enjoy their new homes without disturbance from external factors in the vicinity. As part of the proposals, it will be ensured that all homes will be provided with an access to an electric vehicle charging point. Despite not being a requirement of the outline planning permission, we have undertaken more detailed odour assessments during both the worst case operational period of the adjacent waste transfer site and weather events to enable us to provide greater certainty that the future residents of our development will not be impacted. We have also demonstrated the approved highway network alignment will not prevent the required vehicles entering and exiting the nearby substation site. Our proposals will also ensure a safe public footpath network will be provided and will ultimately facilitate the closure of the undesirable, narrow and overgrown public footpath that adjoins its site from the northern boundary and which ECC Highways have confirmed will remove the sole statutory objection relating to this application. I trust you will find the proposals acceptable and you will concur with the case officer's recommendation and resolve to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Page. Thank you very much. Mr Harris, sorry. That brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement on this application, so we'll now go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Carol. Good evening, Carol.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This application is a reserved matters application in respect of a 250 units residential scheme in respect of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping of the detailed design. As you can see here, this is the location plan. The site is located to the north of Tai Green. This slide shows the aerial view of the application site. The star is where the application site is. The site is quite a big site, as you can see here. It covers quite a bit of ground. On the eastern side, it adjoins Long Green Road, and on the western side is bound by the sharp bend of B1018 Braintree Road. And to the north of the site, it leads to Geddes Corner, and there's a waste processing facilities immediately to the north of the site in the middle. To summarize, the proposal is for 250 units, a minimum of, a total of 4.3 hectare open space has been proposed, and that's including sustainable drainage system. The split of the proposal is for 150 market dwellings, and there's also another 100 units of affordable dwellings, and that's including 15 units of apartment flats. The dwellings are a mix of 1-bed to 4-bed properties, and they are split between traditional and contemporary characters. In terms of traditional, we're talking about materials being used including buff, orange or red bricks. Sorry about the typo here. And black doors and white windows will be used on the traditional units. In terms of contemporary characters, those properties will be using buff and grey bricks, and including grey roof tiles and grey UPVC windows and doors and rainwater goods. This slide shows the master plan of the proposal. As you can see, the southern part of the site, there's a overhead line cables straddle across the site. To the south of this overhead power line, it will be used as one of the major open space, and a locally equipped play area will be provided. Along the Spine Road, it will be mainly occupied by contemporary dwellings. We'll then talk about some of the house type proposed within the development. Let's talk about 4-bed units first. A majority of the 4-bed units are in the Blackwater house type. There's slight variations in terms of contemporary or traditional, in terms of materials, and slight deviations in terms of appearance. The one shown on the slide here is the traditional one, which is located to the eastern part of the site, right behind 2 existing residences. The current slide shows the elevations of this 4-bed house type, and this one shows the floor area. As you can see, on the first floor will be all 4 bedrooms, and there will be a study on the ground floor units as well. The next one I want to show you is a 3-bed house type. This is called Lanham, which is one of the contemporary style dwellings. 8 units of those will be provided along the spiral and see here. So these are the elevations, and this one shows the internal floor plans. All the 3-bedroom units proposed within the development do not contain any studies. The next house type is a 2-bed house type. This house type is called garret. There's a variation in terms of this house type, and quite a majority of this house type is proposed for affordable dwellings. So you can see the elevations here, and the slight variations in terms of the porch design. And this one shows the internal floor plan. A small study is also included within this house type. The next one I want to show you is the apartment unit. This one shows apartment block A, and it is a 3-story building. We'll be providing 9 units, including 3 2-bed units and 6 1-bed units. This apartment block will be the one closest to the new junction of B1018, and this is the elevations of the apartment block A. Next one is apartment block B. It will provide a total of 6 units, 3 1-bed and 3 2-bed units, and they are all affordable units. This is the elevations of block B. The next few slides I want to show you will be the proposed street scenes provided by the applicant. As you can see here on the very top, this one is a view as seen from the entrance along Long Green, which is right here. The middle street scene shows the properties facing towards the depot and the waste transfer station, which is along here on the northern boundary of the site. And the lower one shows those properties facing to the southeast. This will be the, these units will be those units that can be seen from the arable fields to the south of the site. And this slide shows the elevations along the spine road. As you can see here, these units are all contemporary in character, and they will be using buff bricks. Next one shows the 2 street scenes along the southern part of the residential estate. The top one shows the one that will be facing onto the public open space to the south. And the bottom one, apologies, is slightly blurred here. In the middle is actually the pylon tower, and this elevation, this street scene shows the proximity of the dwellings towards the electric pylon. And on the eastern part, on the right-hand side will be the public open space with the play area. This slide shows the apartment blocks, which is located here near to the new junction of B1018. And the bottom one shows the affordable units along the northern part of the application site. And this one shows the elevations along the new realigned B1018 Braintree Road. The middle section shows the triangular port along the existing Braintree Road. So there will be a total of 6 dwellings provided here. 2 are bungalows. And the bottom one shows, again, some of the affordable units at the Lofton part of the application site. As I mentioned earlier, there will be a split between the character of the dwellings. As you can see here, this one shows the materials used within the scheme. Along the main spine road, all the properties will be using block bricks, and then affordable units are pepperboard within the scheme. And along the southeastern boundaries, all the properties are specially designed to have a variety of characters so that it will create an interesting streetscape. So I'm going to show you some of the site photos. The top one, as you can see, it shows the site to the left-hand side of the Braintree Road. The bottom 2 pictures shows the entrance of the sharp bends to the substation, which is out to the northwest of the application site. And this one shows the sharp corner at the moment, which will be realigned. This one shows the existing vacant properties to the northwest of the site along Braintree Road. This slide shows some of the photos along from the site going towards Thai Green Village. And this property is called the Deans, which is the closest property to the application site from the west. This one shows you some of the style of the existing existing dwellings within Thai Green. In terms of the eastern part of the application site, it aligns to the Long Green Road. So this photo shows, as you can see, from Long Green Road into the application site. And these are some of the other 2 photos here show some of the existing properties along Long Green. The top 2 show the 2 nearest residents to the east of the site. And then there's currently a Gypsy and Traveller site to the north of the site. And this photo shows the entrance to the waste transfer station to the immediate north of the site. There's a public right-of-way along the northern boundary of the site, which is behind the gardening centre. This photo shows the existing situation of the footpath. As you can see here, the footpath is actually quite overgrown and is not at the same gradient. So part of it has been of a lower. There's a ditch along the footpath which is currently suffering from surface water flooding at times. This picture shows you from within the site, as you're standing within the southern part of the public right-of-way. If you look towards Long Green, this is the eastern portion of the site. So you can see the building here. This one is the waste processing building. And this one shows the western part of the application site. As mentioned earlier, there's pylon straddle across the southern part of the site. And what has been proposed is from the pylon onwards to the left will be the public open space and will be equipped with a play area. And this photo shows the existing woodland near to the sharp bend of Braintree Road. So, in terms of considerations of this application, just to summarize in terms of consultation response, there's no comments or objection from most of the consultees, including Environment Agency, County Sustainable Drainage System Team, the Minerals and Waste Planning Authority, the Waste Disposal Authority, And in terms of our internal consultee, including the Council's Environmental Health Officer, Heritage Officer, Ecology and Landscape Officers, there's no response received from Crescent Parish Council. And in terms of the pylons and overhead cable lines, there's no objection received from National Grid in relation to that. However, they have, together with UK Power Network, has raised objections in relation to the access design to the substation, which is to the northwest of the site. And there's also objection raised by Essex County Highways in relation to the boundary treatment of the public right-of-way, which I will explain in a bit more detail. As you can see here, this is the proposed boundary treatment plan. Currently, there's a public right-of-way going through the application site like this. And the northern section of the public right-of-way is actually outside the application boundaries. I showed you some photos earlier in terms of the public right-of-way situation currently. What the applicants propose is, because of the location, the proximity of the waste transfer station to the immediate north of the site here, our environmental officer is of the view that there's a need to provide acoustic fencing along this portion to give extra protection to future residents. And because of the need to provide the fencing, it will have a tunneling effect for the northern part of this public right-of-way. And that is the reason why Essex Highways has raised objection. However, they also stress that they're of the view that there might be a possibility that an acceptable alternative could be provided along the spine road here. As you can see here, on the southern part of on the southern side of the spine road, all the way there will be a 3.5 meters wide shared footpath and cycle path. The applicant has also applied for extinguishment to highways in order to extinguish this portion between the garden centre to the tip just outside of the waste transfer station. If approval has been granted tonight for the reserve matters, and once the shared footpath has been constructed up to highway standard, then highways will consider whether or not to accept this extinguishment application. And if the application is approved, then highways will be able to withdraw the current objection to this proposal. So in terms of recommendations, officer has considered that the proposal the proposed appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of the development are acceptable in planning terms. And therefore, it is recommended to grant the reserve matter application subject to conditions attached to the agenda. Just want to have an update. The applicant has provided a revised noise mitigation report, and there's an error in terms of the total number of units that will be subject to high overheating risks, which require ventilation device to be provided. Previously, within the committee report 11.7.5, paragraph 11.7.5 has highlighted that a total of 28 units will be subject to overheating risk. However, the total should be 33 units. So in relation to that, it's been proposed to amend the two conditions. Condition 9 and Condition 10 are in relation to the noise level and the mechanical ventilation operation details of these units. So instead of relating to the whole application site to every single dwelling, the environmental health officer has suggested that is only required for the affected units. So as you can see on the screen here, I'm proposing to insert the red text here so that it relates to the 33 units as listed on Appendix 4 of the latest noise mitigation report. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take some questions.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is in the ward that Councillor Wright and I represent. This was the first of the shocking, quite frankly, inspector's decisions to grant consent, of which we've had a number in our ward, and I know there have been in other wards, which is why I've been questioning, particularly in recent years and more recently, more strongly, why we're actually here, because what our role is as councillors in making decisions, or what our role is in a council in making decisions. The inspector said that this would be seen as an extension of Braintree. Well, as we've seen just now on the overheads, it's not an extension of Braintree. It's almost a freestanding village in the countryside, well to the south of the main built-out area of Braintree, and it's entirely 100% within the rural parish of Cressing. And the inspector paid no attention whatsoever to the local policies as they were at the time. I appreciate we hadn't adopted the local plan at that stage. But it nevertheless was in the countryside. It significantly closes the gap to Cressing Tye Green. And therefore, I mean, how he said that there's no coalescence involved here, well, I don't know if he's looking at the same site as the rest of us. In terms of sustainability, again, a shocker, and I'll come on to a question I've got for officers about that. This is another site with no on-site facilities, no GP surgery, no shop, no community building, no preschool, no pharmacy, absolutely nothing. It's a housing estate in the countryside, disconnected from the surrounding communities. Now, obviously, that decision's been made, and we've got to deal with what we have in front of us. But my main concern is, obviously, we'll welcome the new people when they come, but their living conditions. I think that's my main concern, and I've got a number of points to raise around that. And the first one is the roads. So the main spine road that will link between Long Green and the B1018 is going to become a very significant rat run. It will, in effect, be a southern bypass of Galleys Corner roundabout. And it's going to, if anyone knows the area at peak times, that area is absolutely chock full of vehicles. And clearly, people who are trying to avoid queuing at Galleys Corner will use that spine road. So the people who live on that estate are going to have that coming through. They're also going to, of course, have the B1018 on a realignment through part of the development. I mean, there's some little pockets of houses which are now sandwiched between the B1018 and the old cut-off road, which is quite extraordinary. Now, I know why Highways didn't object, because we have the national policy position that high-waste impacts have to be severe, but there is already very significant peak time queuing at all the junctions in that area, and this will clearly make it worse, along with all the other developments in that area. And that's before we talk about the development of the DIY store and all the rest of it. So I think this is a classic example, yet again, of a massive disconnect between the decision-making that's going on at government and inspector level and what we're trying to do locally. So moving on to the next impact, it is on odour and noise. I read the report very carefully up until this evening. We thought there were 28 properties who would have to have mechanical ventilation. We're now told it's 33. So this is 33 households, and obviously significantly more people than that, who will not be able to do the normal function that most of us can do of opening their windows to ventilate their homes, because they're going to be subjected to high levels of noise. And quite frankly, the report, when I read it, about the hope, really, no more than that people will not be affected by severe odour issues is nothing more than that. I mean, this is right next to the main waste transfer station in this district. There are HGVs going in and out of there all the time, apart from the middle of the night. There is unloading, there's smells, there's lights, there's noise. That is going to impact residents, depending on the weather conditions, obviously, and where the wind's coming from. And I thought there was a key line, actually, at paragraph, it's a long reference, 7.20.10, where it was said that if complaints about the operation of the waste transfer station result in its functioning being affected, that would be a failure of the planning system. Because basically what's happening here is we're developing a housing estate next to a known source of environmental nuisance. But of course people have the right to complain about environmental nuisance under a separate legislative framework. So we've got two things rubbing up against one another, and I don't envy those residents who are going to have to face. I hope they don't, but if they do face those problems. I've asked this before, but it doesn't seem to be addressed. The tree losses. I'm quite amazed that officers say there's been a minimum level of tree losses. The entire woodland on the western side of the site is going to be destroyed. Every single tree, virtually, as far as I'm aware. Clearly not minimal losses. I know the developers have said they're going to plant 300 odd trees to mitigate. But what would always be helpful, I think, in future on these is a simple table saying these are the number of trees which are going to be lost and the species, and these are the number of trees that are going to be planted and the species. That would be really helpful. Because often what we get is, well, this group this is going to go and that individual tree, but it's not set out clearly. And then it's difficult because then those of us who are interested in these things have to go off and read the tree reports, which are often in themselves quite opaque. So that would be really helpful if we could have that in future, or maybe that's my first question, if officers can answer that. Do we have a number for the total number of trees which are going to be lost? And my final question, you'll be glad to know, but this one really I find astonishing. So anyone who knows the agendas of the local highways panel, and anyone who represents this area and anyone who knows this area knows that for decades a significant issue has been the connectivity between Tye Green and Braintree for pedestrians. If you try and walk along there now, along the Cressing Bends, you take your life in your hands. There's a gravel track. We've all seen mums with children in prams buggies trying to negotiate this flooded gravel track. So my question is, can officers explain how residents from this new estate will access the businesses and employment and retail in Braintree? What improvement will there be over the current situation? And more particularly, how they will access, because you didn't mention this in your report, Cressing Primary School, which I would imagine will be the catchment school for these children. Because as I understand it, there is a missing section which County and the Inspector failed to deal with of upgrading the footways that link to Tye Green. So are they still going to have to negotiate a gravel stretch? And also, how are they going to cross the B1018? Is there any provision being given for a pedestrian crossing so they can safely get across? Thank you.
Would you like to respond? Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. If I could come back on a few points initially, and then I'll pass over to Carol on a couple of the detailed points, if that's okay. So, just taking the comments in turn. So I think it's important, as Carol's outlined, obviously outline plan permission has been granted for the site ad Pill, and as part of that, the inspector considered the matter of access. So in terms of some of those points, in terms of the road network and the reconfiguration, some of that has actually been set down effectively by that particular appeal decision. So from an officer perspective, I can completely concur. This is a site that was not supported by us as officers, it was not supported by the council. And one of the reasons for that were for exactly the reasons that you specified, Councillor Abbott, in terms of its location, the relationship to neighbouring uses. However, we can't move away from the fact that that decision has been taken by a planning inspector, and although we may challenge and question the merits of that particular decision, there is an outline plan permission in place here, and as part of that, access was a matter that was approved by the inspector as well. So coming to the first point, and I absolutely take the point, I'm happy to take that back in terms of the tree loss point, but a large amount of the tree loss arises, I think, from the changes in the highway network that set out and that was effectively part of the outline planning permission. And then similarly, in terms of your points about odour and noise, again, it's a basic principle within land use planning. Is the idea is you put sensitive land uses away from noise and odour generating uses. It's one of the basic principles. But unfortunately, again, here we've got the outline permission in place, which accepts up to 250 homes in this location around and adjacent to uses which can potentially give rise to conflict. There isn't something we can do at this stage really to avoid that. We've got to consider the site as it's been granted, And obviously, there's been an awful lot of work that's been done by the applicant, but also by officers to try to come up with a layout and a solution that provides for the number of homes that the outline consent granted in as satisfactory way as possible, to a point where environmental health were comfortable in terms of the neighbouring relationships. That doesn't address the point that you've raised in terms of nearby use, and in reality that is potentially something for, you know, that will have to be monitored in terms of those future residential occupiers. But in terms of the decision that members have got to make this evening, all I can stress is that the matters for consideration this evening relate to appearance, layout, scale and landscaping, and a lot of those points, although members and as officers we may still, as I said, challenge and have concerns about the appeal decision that was made in this case, that is a decision unfortunately that was made, and certainly what we have tried to do and what the applicant has attempted to do with the consent is to try to make the best scheme that we could out of the permission that has been granted in this case. In terms of the highways point, again, I'll pass over to Carol to see whether or not she's got any more detailed information on the exact number of the tree loss, and similarly in terms of the highway point, but just a broad point in terms of highways, that is again a matter because access was considered at the outline stage. That is a matter in terms of its connectivity and relationship and connection into Cressing that should have been addressed at the outline stage or through the appeal decision. So there is no provision. There's obviously the footpath network, as Carol was shown, along the Spine Road, but up to a point towards Cressing that there's nothing in terms of a crossing point or improvement to link that into the wider Cressing. And I appreciate that's going to be an issue of concern, but again, that's something that should have been addressed at the appeal stage by the planning inspector, and it's beyond the scope of the reserve matters application that's effectively before us. On a positive front, what it does do is it provides that pedestrian connectivity up to where the garden centre is, up to where the crossing point is in a million ways, so it enables a linkage, but I appreciate that doesn't address your point, Councillor Abbott, in terms of its connectivity to Cressing, and certainly the wider point in terms of the site's relationship with Braintree and Cressing and access to shops and services and facilities. But again, outline plan permission has been granted, so the principle of this quantum of development has been considered to be acceptable. So I think while I note those concerns, all I can do is just stress to members that the matter that's before you for consideration is purely those detailed reserve matters that now arise from that inspector's decision, and a lot of those concerns fall, you know, effectively refer back really to the outline consent that was granted. I'll pass over to Carol to see whether or not there's any more detailed information on the tree point, if I may, Carol. Thank you much.
Thank you. Just in response to the number of trees to be felled, there's no Cat A trees to be felled. And in terms of Cat B, there's one tree and one group of trees that also consisting of suckers, brambles, and young specimens. And there's another category C tree to be felled, and there's two group of Cat C trees, and again it consists of suckers, brambles, and young specimens. And there's also unclassified trees to be removed. And in terms of hedges, there's one to be removed and one to be trimmed back to boundary. And if we talk about linkage, on the slide here, this is the proposed highway works that the applicant is currently in discussion with County Highways under the Section 278 application. However, this has not been approved, it's still in discussion, but the applicant has done quite a few rounds of amendments in response to Highways requests. And as you can see here, in terms of what has been approved from the outline, obviously we have the Spine Road agreed with the new roundabout with 3 exits. Each of the exits on the spur there will be a drop curb crossing. So this has been approved as part of the outline consent. But what the applicant currently discussing with Highways is on the western side of this junction along here. Currently, from Millennium Way, there's around the corner there's a shared footpath and cycleway, and Highway has been requesting the applicants to widen to extend this provision and actually all the way to this triangular port here, and then because of the crossing, then it will terminate there, and then it will be provided with a 2 meters wide footpath. So anyone like cycling to and from the site towards Millennium Way will, the best way, if approved under Section 278, will be to cross at this point and then using the western side to join up with the existing cycle path. And in terms of the southern part of this junction, I understand that publics and board members have concern regarding the existing footpath linkage from Thai Green linking to near to the substation and into this realigned junction. We have a discussion with County Highways. What currently being requested is the applicant under 278 is to provide a drop curb here to facilitate crossing from the proposed joint shared cycle path to cross the road. However, on the western side of the road, currently there's a gravel path, is unpaved. The problem is there's not much extent that is within the application site and under Highways extent. The highway extent is actually the same as the application boundary along this road. There's a pinch point around here that the Highways strategic engineer is of the view that is actually less than 1 meter wide. That is under Highways extent. So no matter whether it will be whether it's proposed by the applicant or full local highway panel, there might be a chance that the road safety team might not even agree for anyone to resurface this section because it's less than 1 meter. So that would need to be subject to another application to County Highways. In terms of the eastern side of this road, as you can see around here, there's currently the existing building is really close to the highway extent. Again, it's impossible to provide a 3.5 meters wide shared footpath and cycle path all the way along this side. And there's a bottleneck issues here at the southern part of this SS road that is just not wide enough to provide the required footpath and cycle path. So Highways officer is of the view that it would be, in terms of visibility, it would be safer for anyone to cross the road before this ban. And that's the connection to the wider area.
I'll let you come back, Councillor.
If I may, because it is important locally. Well, on the trees, with respect, it doesn't tell us how many trees, and I know, having looked at the plans, that all of that woodland area is coming out. So, but anyway, focusing on this, thank you, it was very helpful in explaining where we were, and also in confirming what we'd heard, which is that this is still being discussed. It's not been finalised yet. So all we can do locally is urge officers, county level and district level, to try and get as much out of this as they can. But it also confirms that, particularly in that right-hand thin drawing, that despite the fact that all of the land down to where there is a hard, I believe all the way down to where there is a hard path in Thai Green, is within the application site, it's within the red line, and yet we still haven't got an agreement on providing a proper footway. And I can't really believe County is seriously saying, oh, we won't resurface it because it's not wide enough. People use it. We're talking here about local residents, both the ones moving in and the ones who are there now. For goodness sake, they pay their taxes. They want a proper path, and we've just been discussing this for decades locally. So, I won't add any more, but whatever officers can do to progress that, we'd be very grateful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. I support wholeheartedly everything that Chairman Levitt has said about this inspector decision, in my experience, is one of the worst that we've ever had as a council. I don't think any of us really truly believed that there would be housing here for the reason, the disconnect, the waste transfer station, it was just something that we thought would go away, and we were amazed when the inspector not only granted our outline position, but appeared to not notice various themes, not to address them at all, and he's left us with a dog's breakfast, and we're into damage and limitation here. We unfortunately have to sort of accept that our hands are tied on quite a lot of these issues that we would have liked to have been addressed, and we've just got to consider the site as it has been permitted and try and make the best of it that we can. There are, a few positives you can pick out. My original main concern was noise and odour, but there is I think an adequate buffer zone which will help and some sort of mitigation against noise and odour. One thing that has been improved is the housing mix, and there is now a greater proportion of smaller housing units relating to expressed local housing need. All house types do meet NDSS standards and Essex Design Guide standards for sort of garden sizes and back-to-back distances. So that's a plus that we don't always see, and it's good that the applicant has been prepared to accept multiple amendments from officers, read the detailed design, but we and the developer have been left in a hole by the inspector, and got to do our best to scramble out of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I also wholeheartedly agree with the comments made by Councillor Abbott and endorsed by Councillor Mann. I mean, I'm massively uncomfortable about this, but appreciate, where we stand, but I still feel it's complete overdevelopment in the countryside, standing alone with no infrastructure. And, just makes a complete mockery of the words place making. There is no place making, and it just reminds me so much of the piece of work I went through with the housing estate near Oak Road in Halstead. There's so many sort of similar, sort of commonalities. But the point I just wanted to make was that I thought Carol actually did a pretty good presentation and tried to pull all this together best she could and gave us, as much information. But just on the point that Carol made about no representation from Cressin Parish Council, I think it is really important to say that actually, when one does read through the papers and, look at the representations, there was more than adequate representation by Cressin Parish Council initially, and it's mentioned in the inspector's decision, and I really think we just need to be mindful of that. And also, even on the back page, interested people, again, there is a councillor there from Cressin Parish Council, and I think it is really important, actually, just to note that clearly there is interest from the parish council, and I don't know, but one would assume they feel just as frustrated and complacent as we do, but we've clearly got to sit here tonight and take the decision. So I just wanted to make that point, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm of the same opinion, obviously, in regards to the appeal decision. It's just a crazy decision, not the first time sort of Crescent and Silverend have been on the back end of a really, really poor decision. And knowing the area very well, even at the moment, I know we're not here to discuss, like, it's got outline permission, but like the garden centre roundabout is queued back at Gallies Corner, not Gallies Corner, at Clayport's Corner in Crescent. It's gridlocked, and that's even before Starbucks opens, you know what I mean? So there's going to be major issues. I think, I still think that Crescent Parish Council is such a significant application. I still think I take on board Councillor Beavis' comments, but as a parish council, they haven't objected to something of such significance for the area, and I think that's I think that's a bad call. I do have a question connected to. I know we've had the highways plan and the connection now. The history of Crescent, when the garden centre had planning permission, there was through the application, it was paid for a footpath to connect from the garden centre to Long Green. Are we finally going to get that as part of this application? Because that was paid for at the time, so we've been waiting a number of years for that. So I just wanted to double check that as part of this, we are finally going to get that, and then that will help appease with the connection through in the area of Crescent. Thank you.
Can you respond to that, please?
So the honest answer, thank you for the question, Councillor Bowers. The honest answer to that is I'm not sure. So that's obviously a very historic consent in terms of the garden centre. That would be a matter, you know, for the County Highways Department effectively to deliver, which, yeah, appreciate there's been long-standing conversations around the Cressing Bends and about trying to provide that footpath link. So as Carol's outlined, as part of the outline consent, access was a matter that was approved. So the reconfiguration of the highway network, which effectively takes the footpath connection from where the garden centre leaves off and that crossing point over the B101 8th Braintree Road over to Millennium Way through to that pinch point effectively where you get to on the Cressing Bend. So what's missing is that final stretch, which was, Carol, I don't know if you could just put the plan back up actually. It was the second image that we, on the right hand side, which showed the last bit of the Cressing Bend effectively. So the footpath for the development side would come down to a certain point. It's not really possible to extend it beyond that to provide the connection. And then on the other side of the road, this is where yeah, thanks, Carol. So on that diagram, on the right hand side of that image shows the bends as you're coming round into Cressing. And on the left-hand side of that, that's effectively the gravelled, unmade bit of the footpath. And I think it's not until you get, I'm sure Councillor Abbott will correct me, I think it's not until you get to the first property as you come into Cressing on the left-hand side where they've got a drop curb. I think after that you then end up with the pavement effectively starting. So more than happy for us as officers to go away to check that. But in terms of, again, the application before you, the outline consent has been granted, all the mitigation, well, there is no further mitigation that was secured at the outline stage, so effectively what you're looking at there is effectively an approved plan. So if there was anything in addition, if there are any other monies from Section 106, that would be a matter for the County Highways Department to try to utilise, but I don't know whether or not that's the case or not, I'm afraid, Councillor Bowers.
Councillor Mrs Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I concur with many of the comments that have been made about the inspector's decision. But turning to the matters that we have to address in this application, the main one that is concerning me is actually the layout. I think it's. I would actually hate to be living myself overlooking a roundabout, and the block of flats is literally on the roundabout, as are a couple of houses. So I think that is not a good layout. The other area that's concerning me is the houses which are almost right underneath the pylon that is within the site. Again, I think that is fairly unacceptable to be asking people to live in a house right underneath the pylon. I mean, it's almost, close as their garden. I have noticed, actually, I looked at the original layout for the outline application, and the area where the block of flats is near the roundabout was originally not going to be developed, as was the sort of top corner that goes is backing onto the waste transfer site and I think it's the Gypsy and Traveller site. There are a couple of few houses there which that area wasn't going to be developed either. So it is causing me concern that originally it was felt that it wouldn't be appropriate to develop those particular areas, and now for some reason there are additional units going in there. So I'm broadly happy with the main layout, but I just think, in the interest of getting a full 250 homes in there are aspects of the layout which I think are unacceptable. I am concerned about the noise. I think 33 houses with mechanical ventilation, presumably that's a fan, which also causes a noise. That's a pretty high number of properties which are going to have to either endure noise of one form or other. I would just like to ask, has the issue about the tipping of bottles and tipping of broken glass been addressed in the noise report? It seemed to me the noise report, not that I looked at huge detail, but it seemed to be mainly addressing traffic noise. So I just would like some assurance that that aspect of noise has been addressed. I think there will be a problem with National Grid getting any new transformers probably into the site, but our National Grid didn't object to the original outline application, so I'm afraid they're probably stuck with probably having to bring those transformers through Witham if they can't get them around the corner. So there are a number of aspects that, even on the limited grounds on which we can look at this application, I'm afraid I'm not happy with. Thank you.
I don't think it's fans, if you read the report, it's solar blinds that they'll be using. Okay. Councillor Mrs Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Although I didn't know if Carol was going to come back on
Right. No,
just before I...
I wasn't sure if you wanted us to come back on the tipping the glass.
yes, all right.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah.
Sorry, just want to explain. In terms of the tipping of glass, our environmental health officer is aware of the concern raised by the waste team. However, in terms of tipping of glass, is only if operation is working on a Saturday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, that will be the major concern. However, is of the view that because it's only for, especially for May and August bank holiday, that for that week the operation will be extending to Saturday, and otherwise there's only 4 other weekends within a year that will have the additional operation during weekend. And that's why the environmental health officers of the view that is not a constant problem, and because usually the tipping it won't be continuous for a long time, and that's why it's not considered that is up to an extent that it could be regarded as a statutory nuisance. So that's why the environmental health officers of the view that is short span sand that will not be considered to be detrimental to amenity level.
Yes, but that assumes that everybody is only at home at weekends, and a lot of people are at home during the week, aren't they? I'm sorry. Now I come to Mrs Berry.
Thank you, Chairman. I find myself pretty much entirely in agreement with Councillor Abbott's comments, and that doesn't always happen, but has this evening, and also with the other comments made by colleagues on the committee. I think there were really good reasons why this committee refused this application originally. We were not at all sure that it was an appropriate site for development, and there were also concerns around its proximity to Cordons Farm and the potential for noise and odour. And I think that the fact that running through Carol's very good report, there are concerns about noise and odour and the impact on residents just rather backs up our concerns at the time, and the issues around highways and connectivity also highlighted in the report, another reason. But, you know, we have an inspector who, somewhat astoundingly, in my opinion, saw things completely differently. So I do appreciate that officers have worked very hard with the applicant to get the best out of what I think is a bad inspector's decision. I just hope that, you know, if and when the site is built out, that people buying or renting the houses are well aware of where they are and the potential for noise and odour, because I think with the best will in the world, despite all the measures that are proposed and are going to be put in place, it's not going to be an ideal place to live. It really isn't. So I just hope that people go into it with their, you know, eyes wide open. I think we're between a rock and a hard place with this tonight. You know, we have an outline permission granted on appeal. We could refuse this, but the applicant would appeal, which they have every right to do. And I can't see another inspector overturning a previous inspector's decision. I don't think that can happen. I don't think deferral gets us anywhere, because I'm not sure. I mean, Carol's worked really hard on this, I'm sure, with support from other colleagues, and I'm not sure that there will be any massive more improvement that would come back to us. So I do think it's extremely difficult. But with great reluctance, Chairman, and I say that really clearly, with great reluctance, I'm going to move officer's recommendation for approval, because I'm not sure that we've got anywhere else much to go with it. But like others here, I'm really unhappy about it, but I will move it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Spray, does that find a seconder anyway? Councillor Mann.
The same sort of reasons, yeah. We've got to be the grown-ups here. We've got to pinch our noses and sort of do our duty in agreeing this.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone wish to add anything further on this discussion? Well, it has been moved reluctantly to be approved and seconded, and that includes the change condition 9 and 10, I presume, Councillor. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman.
All those in favour? 1, 2, 3. Gosh, those against? Abstentions? That application has been granted. Thank you, members.
Madam Chair, what was the vote, please?
3-2. That now brings us on to the next application, which is application 22-01469 REM Tarlands, Panfield Road, Braintree. Can be found on pages 63 to 101. And I do have one speaker on this application. Good evening, Mr. Michael Smith. You know the drill, 3 minutes. You've been often enough.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the applicants, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. The Outline Planning Commission secures the creation of up to 575 new homes, together with supporting infrastructure that includes an early years and childcare nursery, small-scale retail uses, a community centre, new parkland and an ecological management area. The detailed scheme for the second phase of the residential development follows on from the committee's approval of 3 elements of the scheme last year: the ecological mitigation area in March, the first phase of the residential scheme in April, and the new neighbourhood centre building in November. The ecology area is complete and has been brought into use, creating a new home for the newts translocated from the construction site and delivering the scheme's biodiversity enhancements at an early stage. While the first phase of the residential scheme is under construction and new homes will be ready for families to move into this summer. The scheme presented to you this evening comprises the northern and central parts of the overall site, containing 162 high-quality 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5-bedroom homes, bungalows and apartments, together with the second section of the Spine Road from the Deanery Hill entrance, laid out as a formal avenue that runs straight to the village green. The proposed scheme is designed in compliance with the parameter plans and the design code that form part of the outline planning permission. The design code places a focus on the creation of a sense of place and establishing a distinct character for the new homes, using the road hierarchy to offer different forms for the public realm. In all cases, a perimeter block form is created and the houses are placed close to the edge of the street with regular spacing so they create a rhythm and a distinct form to enclose the streets. They display variation in appearance as required by the character areas defined by the design code. Phase 2 includes streets that are part of the Parkland Edge North, the Barnes River Edge, the Avenue and the lanes. Traditional building forms and materials are proposed, including pitched roofs, projecting porches, combinations of brickwork, boarding and render, and elements of detailing and variation in fenestration. The result is a set of new homes constructed to the latest standards that reflect the traditional Essex vernacular, continuing the themes already established in Phase 1. We have worked hard in partnership with the Council's team to ensure that a high-quality scheme will be created, delivering compliance with the design code and continuing the character that has already been approved. In short, the scheme to address the reserve matters for the second residential phase will continue the delivery of a new neighbourhood that follows the approved design code to create a high-quality, aspirational, beautiful place where tomorrow's families can thrive happily and safely. As such, I trust you will concur with the case officer's recommendation and resolve to approve the matters for the second phase of the new homes and the former Townland Centre.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Smith. Thank you. I have no one else wishing to make a statement on this application this evening, so we'll go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Tim. Good evening, and thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. Okay, so this is an application for Phase 2 at the Townland site. I know members are familiar with this because it came through Members' Forum just 2 weeks ago, so I'll keep the presentation fairly concise. Application for reserve matters for 162 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5-bedroom houses, bungalows and apartments with parking, landscaping and the second section of the Spine Road from the Deanery Hill entrance. So site location plan. The overall Townland site is outlined with the blue line, and then the area of land that we're looking at is this central section here. So just a quick refresher. Phase 1 was this turquoise area. Phase 0 at the northern end was the ecology area in purple. We're obviously on to Phase 2, and then there'll be future phases coming to the west in the grey area here. But we're looking today at the central area of the site. So a few site photos. This again is just a refresher really. This is an approved access, so we're not considering access today. However, it's just a reminder where the main site access is, and as you saw at the Members' Forum presentation, some of these properties are now built, so the site is up and running. So this is the main site entrance from Panfield Lane. And then the second approved site entrance is onto Deanery Hill, and this photo is actually taken inside the site looking back out towards Deanery Hill. But that's the second access point. This access point is probably more relevant today because this is the one where the Spine Road section that is covered by this application connects into. Northern end of the site, so I mentioned the ecology area, that Phase 0, so that's where this tree belt is. The ecology area is just on the other side of that, and Phase 2 that we're looking at now incorporates the top section here which sits adjacent to that ecology area, and then it essentially plugs into the already approved site access here, and then it runs down the rest of the Townland site in this direction here. And this photo is taken at the top of the Townland site looking down towards Braintree. You can see one of the existing buildings which will be demolished. I think it already has been, in fact, this one on Townlands. But this is the bulk of the application site that we're considering. So you're looking essentially down across Phase 2. Elements of Phase 1 would be on this side of the screen and then down the bottom here. And then another view to the east, so still at the top of the site. I'll take this one just to show there's one existing neighbour, just one, which is Oak Cottage. That's this house here. And then finally a photo down the bottom. It's quite difficult to get photos inside the site now. It's obviously a working construction site, but what you're looking at here is the existing pond, and then part of the new SUD system, and then the main town of Braintree here. And you can just see here the rooftops of Phase 1. So that's what we were looking at when I took that photo, standing on Panfield Lane. And the public footpath that runs up along the side of the site is here. The proposed site plan, so this is Phase 1 and 2 together, and then Phase 0 up here. Phase 1, you can see here, probably not the clearest on this slide, but there's a slight colour differentiation, so this is a bit bolder, this is a bit lighter. Basically, Phase 2 is primarily housing, so Phase 1 covered a lot of the site's infrastructure. So Phase 1 covered all the SUD schemes, where that last photo that we were just looking at was taken down here. It covered all of the SUD schemes. It covered areas of open space up along the side here, and it also covered this SUD basin. So Phase 2 is more straightforward insofar as it's primarily housing, although it does incorporate part of the informal wildflower meadow up here. Story heights, just to show some of the differences really. So the blue is the 2-storey, elements of 2.5 storey, which are in green, and then we've got some 3-storey marker buildings here, which are both apartment blocks. And this also sort of shows really the development parcel. So we've got really 2 areas of development, one on the western side of the main spine road, the main spine road being here and then curving round, and then we've got the other larger development parcel to the east here. Affordable housing locations, there was a question at Members Forum where the parcels were. So this sets out where they are. You can see they're quite well spread across Phase 2. So remembering that this section here is Phase 1. So in terms of Phase 2, they're quite well spread across the whole length of it. They're still clustered as per our normal requirements, but they're spread fairly substantially. And some house type examples. We did a lot of work at Phase 1, and that's been mirrored again in Phase 2, where we pushed the developer quite hard with their house types. So we've got, they're essentially traditional designs, but some of them have a more contemporary take on them. They reflect what's approved in the approved design code, so they sit within that framework that they're required to. Most of them are fairly standardised, 2-storey. I've included a couple of sort of interesting ones. This is the bungalow, one of the bungalow types down here, and then the maisonette here. So that looks like a house, but it's in fact a maisonette, which I think is quite a successful house type. A couple of floor plans. Again, they all meet national space standards, so there's nothing below space standards. We don't have anything that's sort of single aspect or low quality in any of that, any of those terms. And then some street scenes, which I think you saw a number of these at the Members Forum, but I think they do help just to bring this to life a bit. So this is on the main spine road at one of the junctions. The spine road properties are all similar material to create that avenue effect. The tree-lined avenue of the spine road is one of the key features of the site. Again, looking along the spine road here, so the architecture is designed essentially to break the site into the character areas which are set out within the design code. Deanery Hill frontage, so that single neighbouring property, Oak Cottage, is around here. The developer did a lot of work on the previous phase, and they've continued that on this phase to minimise the impact on that neighbour. And that neighbour has also had quite a lot of input into this, so it's been good in that respect in terms of reducing neighbour impact. One of the flatter blocks, sort of marker buildings to help with the essentially with the navigation as you're moving around the site. It's a feature building, again compliant with the design code. So these are all features that this application's had to comply with. And then a street scene looking towards one of the Deanery Hill play areas. So there are a number of play areas that were built into the application at the outline stage, and they've been brought through correctly into the reserve matter stage. Again, it just gives you a feel for the kind of character that we're talking about here. So overall, if I start at the beginning, it was an allocated site, or it is an allocated site in the local plan. We're at the reserve matters stage. The reserve matters this time round, as with the previous phase, officers feel is a high quality design and layout. We put a lot of work into it, and we've asked quite a lot of the developer, which they've responded very positively to. The scheme's been amended a number of times, and our urban designers had very lengthy input into those amendments. We've got no objection from statutory consultees, and it reflects the aspirations of the outline permission in officers' view, complies with the design code, and it is of a high quality. So, based on all of those factors, our recommendation is that it's approved. I've got a couple of updates, Madam Chairman, if I could. So 3 quick updates. There's one drawing number which would need to be deleted, which was an error. So there's a house type which is a Clarliston, and the drawing number, I'll read it out in full just for the record. It's DN001PH2CSC03 revision A. So that's a house type that's not in this house type, this pack of house types, so that'll be deleted. Secondly, the electric vehicle charging strategy, the actual strategy document, is updated to the 31st of January 2023, so that's just a date change. And then the last one, currently we've got condition 7 that requires an indemnity policy, essentially, to be submitted by the developer, so that when BDC refuse vehicles go or drive over private roads, there can't be a claim made against the council. We had that as a condition. However, after discussing that further internally, the advice is that we should be switching that to a legal agreement. So that would be a removal of condition 7 and replacement with a very straightforward unilateral undertaking, which would require exactly the same thing, this submission of an indemnity policy, so that nobody can make a claim against the council should those private roads be damaged by our refuse vehicles. That's all the updates I have, and that's the end of the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Here's the difference. This is an allocated site, a strategic site in our local plan, one that we've chosen, and that we prefer to see developed. I mean, my principal reservation was at outline stage. I'm comfortable with the cumulative impact of traffic on the village of Bamfield, on Bockingshire Street, and the impact on the very sort of narrow sort of Bamfield Lane. But it's not on the table tonight, and I do hope that the county council, in their wisdom, will eventually come to the sort of realisation that they'll have to do something about the on-road parking at the bottom of Bamfield Lane and the problems that causes. The only point that I would pick up on is the very considerable sort of loss of trees, 154, and I hope that over the coming months colleagues will remember that on the site as a whole, our aim is net tree gain. So do your sums and make sure that in fact the expectation becomes reality, and that the trees are replaced and more. Otherwise, as has been pointed out, there are no objections from statutory consultees. The officers consider that it's well designed as an application, and is in all a carefully considered proposal. I tend to agree with them, and will with more enthusiasm move officers' recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Just find a seconder before I move on. Does Councillor Mrs. Sprain, did you wish to add anything?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, well, as Councillor Mann indicated, this is positively refreshing after the last one. I think it did benefit from coming to the Members' Forum. We were able to ask some good questions on design and layout, so familiarise ourselves with it, which has helped this evening. I actually had reason to drive past the site at the weekend, and although I didn't stop, I didn't have anybody driving right up behind me, so I slowed down, and it was nice to see that it's being built out. It looked starting to look good. Yes, there's much to like about it. I concur with Councillor Mann's point about the number of trees, and I hope that there will be. My understanding is that there is going to be significant planting and landscaping on the site. But yes, I'm very happy to second the approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, briefly, I agree with the mover and the seconder that we're in a very different place with this application. And I just wanted to pick out that the housing mix is really good. I think, we often have had occasion to question when they try to ram in loads of 4 and 5 bedrooms, but this one, the mix is really good. On the trees, yes, I agree with Councillor Mann. Let's hope that not only are the tree replacements successful, the numbers are adequate, but also that they are successful. It remains a concern for myself, and I know loads of other people who work with trees, that it's all very well saying you're going to replace, but with climate change, it's getting increasingly difficult to keep young trees alive and thriving because of if we get more summers like the last one, when they're literally frying, it's 40 degrees centigrade. So that's a major issue. The only question I had was, we've been told by the developers that they take a dark skies friendly approach to their lighting. Is that captured somewhere? Because I couldn't see a condition. Is it in the list of plans we've got in front of us tonight? Because I haven't been through all of them. Or is it captured by a previous consent, what the lighting's going to be? And to reiterate the point I made previously, and I will again tonight, almost all of the estates being built in the areas I go around have got these up-down porch lights. Now, given that we've got thousands of houses are going to be built in the next few years, that's potentially thousands of these lights shining straight up, which waste 50% of their energy, are terrible for biodiversity, and are adding to light pollution in the sky, when surely, if you're going to have a porch light, and obviously people are entitled to have a porch light, it shines down where you need it. I think they're sort of fashionable and they're being done for effect, but in terms of sustainability, they're horrendous. So that was my question. Is what we were told by the developers captured anywhere? Have I missed it? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the lighting, it's dealt with by way of condition attached to the outline permission. It's our standard condition. It doesn't have a phrase in it saying dark sky required, but it's our standard lighting condition.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Yes, I'm very happy with this scheme. I think the quality of design is pretty high, and landscaping layout. So yes, well done to all those who've worked on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, members, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. That was the drawing to be deleted regarding a house type, electric charging changes up to 2023, and remove condition 7 and have a unilateral agreement added. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you. That now brings us on to the next application, which is 5C application 2202522 land adjacent to Weavers Park, Courtauld Road, Braintree. I do have 2 speakers on this application, and the first person to make a statement is Mrs. Lisa Skinner. Good evening, Mrs. Skinner. Mr. Skinner is the agent. I'll just remind you, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to address the committee. The applicant engaged a professional team to prepare draft proposals prior to entering pre-application discussions with the council, their heritage advisors and the County Highway Authority. We have listened to the advice provided and the scheme has been amended accordingly. We are concerned at the lack of engagement during the planning application process and believe a number of comments within the committee report are factually incorrect, and this affects the likely outcome of the application. These have been referred to in a letter sent to members yesterday. We appreciate that design is a subjective matter and have always sought to engage in a positive manner and wish to continue to do so. We know members will balance all of the planning issues before them, and the applicant merely seeks a fair hearing. In relation to design, we have provided information as part of the submission as to why the proposed form of the development relates to other buildings in the area in terms of mass, bulk and scale, along with design and heritage matters, and this has included an assessment of the block form in the surrounding area. This information has not been referenced in the report. It is also clear this is not a 4-storey building, as has been stated. In relation to vehicle parking, the site is in a highly sustainable location, and the Highway Authority has raised no objection to the number of parking spaces or their size. There is at least 1 space per flat and additional visitor spaces. The principle of development has always been accepted by officers, and the loss of open space was never raised during the pre-application discussions or during the application process. In relation to biodiversity, the applicant has fully considered the ecological and arboricultural impacts on this site. An entirely holistic approach has been taken that includes fauna and flora, with a biodiversity assessment that already confirms an overall uplift on the site from approximately 4 to 10 habitat units. The applicant has already stated they were prepared to plant additional trees that could be subject to a planning condition. In relation to affordable housing, the applicant stated during the pre-application discussions that they are prepared to provide 30% affordable housing on site. 10 registered social landlords were approached prior to the submission of the application who own 19% of the affordable stock in the district. None were interested due to the size of the scheme, the fact it is a flatted development and the mix of tenure. It was agreed that an off-site contribution would be acceptable, and the applicant agreed a brief with the council and to pay for an independent assessment of the report. The actual brief to the consultant was different to what the applicant agreed to pay. This is not right. Rather than the application be refused at this meeting, we would like to request that it is deferred, and we seek the opportunity to discuss the application at a planning forum, or as a minimum have a meeting with officers and members. This is a site within a development boundary, not a greenfield site, predominantly a former car park and in a highly sustainable location. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And now can I invite Mr. Glenn Richardson, he is also the agent, to speak on the same application. Good evening. Yes, please. That's all right.
I do apologise. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm here in support of the application on behalf of the applicant, Weavers Park Limited. The main thrust of our argument today is that the proposal is not out of context with its surroundings, as is alleged by officers. On design matters, in paragraph 11.2.7, the officer report notes the proposal comprises a, I quote, contrived mass with a single block form which lacks design quality, finesse and authenticity. I invite you to refer to the visuals Lisa Skinner has provided in our separate letter of response from yesterday's committee report. In reply, we consider the building mass is a direct response to the setting of the site in this part of Braintree. The building ends drop down to respond to John Ray House, as well as the flats at Coxhill Road. The building is divided into a series of bays, not unlike a row of individual terraces, in order to both break up the length of the building as well as provide a buried roof line. Use of a single block form is hardly a reason for refusal. The design is contemporary interpretation of terrace housing form found all over the town, particularly Coxhill Road, Bradford Road, to name but a few streets. Many details are finessed to create visual interest, including windows, deep reveals, and dormer windows in the roof line. The building is not a repeat or cut and paste of another block of flats. It is entirely authentic for this location. Paragraph 11.2.8 is reference to a 4-story block, unrealistic roofscape, disguise of a large flat roof, the poor aesthetic, overly complicated arrangement of gables and flat roofs, and so on. No sympathies to the sincere typologies of the former school and gymnasium. Our response is the building is not 4 stories. There is a significant difference, but rather it's 3 stories with an attic roof level with some flats. Three-storey buildings are entirely common in this part of Braintree, and there are many examples around the site of either 3 stories or buildings of a similar or taller height than what we are proposing. The roof is part flat in the central part, but this is not visible from the model views. Gables are hardly overcomplicated. There's 5 gable bays that correspond to either side of the building. 11.2.9 officers refer to scarce examples of 4-story forms and contrived shapes and so on, overly complex and visually insensitive design. Again, this is not a 4-story building. There's reference in the report to dishonest design. This is frankly a non-statement, unfair and misleading, frankly, for officers to include in a public report. Dishonest to what? The roof drops down at the flanks for a reason. There is evidence as to why, no evidence rather, why this is a concern to officers. The building has a clear rhythm of bays and gables and a consistent palette of red-facing brick, which is very common in the area. The application sites within, what once was school grounds. The site does not now read, nor is it understood as a form of school grounds. 11.4.1.
No, I'm sorry, you've had the 3 minutes, and we have got it in writing, so
Okay,
we'd just
that's
like to do your final conclusion.
So in conclusion, pardon me, Madam Chair, we consider the design respects the surrounding context and complies with relevant local plan policies and the NPPF. Thank you for your time.
No, I did stop you because I knew there was an awful lot more.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't have
Right, thank you very much indeed, thank you. But we do have copies to follow anyhow. Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of speakers on that application. We'll now go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Melanie. Good evening, Melanie, and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just setting up the presentation. There we go. Good evening, members. The application before you this evening is for the erection of 29 flats with associated access, parking and amenity areas on land adjacent to Weavers Park, Coulthard Road and Braintree. The next few slides will put the site in context, although most of you, I'm sure, are aware of where the site is, as it's not too far from the council offices. So this first slide shows the... skipped forward there. So this first slide shows the application site outlined in red. We can make out John Ray House, the far end of, or the closest corner of Tabor House, and then properties Parkview that are accessed off of Coggeshall Road. This drawing here is, and there's a lot of detail on here that you wouldn't be able to see in terms of land levels, but this gives you an indication of particularly the trees and vegetation across the existing site, and also the amount of hard standing that is already on the site in the form of the mini roundabout and the area of hard standing here where the flats are proposed. I thought it was useful to share this aerial photograph of the site as it puts in context the site with Weavers Park. You can just make out the corner of our offices where we're currently sat. We can also see John Ray House, Tabor House, the buildings used by Mencap, the car parking that is provided on site for Tabor House, and then the application site itself here in the middle. So the next few slides put in context the actual proposals. So this plan here is the proposed site plan, or block plan as you will. So we can make out the footprint of the flat block. We've also then got bin storage and cycle storage to the south of the site. And then most of the proposed car parking here is to the left-hand side. The next slides take you through the proposed floor plans of the proposed building. So they're fairly similar. And then I just wanted to stop on this last slide here, which is the accommodation within the 4th floor, which in my mind, still substantial, and I would consider that to be a fourth floor within the proposed structure. The next slide shows you the proposed roof plan, and so this is the section that would be the flat roof section, and then you have the small areas of pitched roof around the sides of the building. The next slide show you the elevations. So these are the north and south elevations, so the longer elevations of the proposed building. On this top one here, we can make out, sorry, excuse me, John Ray House has been ghosted onto the drawing, and then to the south, to the drawing on the bottom here, we can make out the existing residential buildings in Park View. And then we've got the smaller elevations, which are the east and west elevations. This slide here shows you the details for the proposed bike and bin store. The next slide here shows you the proposed hard and soft landscaping. So you can see one of the points that was raised within the officer report was the lack of visual mitigation within the car parking, which is clearly shown here in terms of the lack of vegetation and any landscaping within there. I've repeated the aerial photograph here because the next few slides shows tree protection, but in particular the tree removal that's proposed, and so I thought it would be useful to replicate this slide just so that you can see the amount of trees that sit within the application site. It's broadly in this sort of reversed C shape, and then there is also then some planting within the centre of the site within the mini roundabout. So I've split this drawing into two just so that you can see it in a bit more detail. So you've got a number of trees that run around the sort of top portion of that C shape of tree planting, which will be removed to make way for the building. We've also got the circular section here that would be removed. There is a tree, a proposed tree here that will be protected, which is the cerise colour here, which is shown as tree protection. These are the trees that run along the southern boundary of the site, and one of those is proposed to be removed. The remainder are shown to be retained and then subsequently protected during works. And then this is the area where car parking is proposed, and there is some vegetation along here which is proposed to be removed. The next few slides are photographs of the site, just from various different angles. These photographs here are taken from standing within the park. This first one here is looking at a corner of the site and John Ray House, and then turning further away from John Ray House, we can see then more of the application site and some of the trees that are to be removed. These photographs are looking at the site and again the trees that will be removed. And then this bottom photograph here shows the footpath that sits outside of the application site but kind of runs parallel to one boundary of it. And again, these trees here are to be removed. So then taking a different vantage point, these photographs are taken to the west. And so you can just make out these are the flats called Park View. And these lower buildings here are the buildings that serve as the MENCAP charity. And then this bottom photograph here is looking across the car park that currently serves Tabor House, and again the MENCAP building here. And then turning with my back to Tabor House, we can make out the application site and the expanse of hard standing that's there at the moment and the number of trees. And then in this photograph here, you can just make out in the corner here the roof of John Ray House. These larger trees are the ones that sit within the entrance to Weavers Park, so don't form part of this application site, but the perspective in the photograph can be a bit misleading, so they don't relate to the application as such at all. It's these trees here. A couple more photographs here. So again, you can see the context of the application site and John Ray House. And then this photograph here is taken from Coggeshall Road, looking up through the car park that serves Tabor House, which is here on the left-hand side. You can make out John Ray House here, and then the buildings along this boundary here that serve the MenCap charity. And then the application site and the proposed building would sit roughly where my cursor is here. Again, this is a closer shot showing where the proposed building would sit, roughly here where my cursor is showing here. These photographs here show a sort of a closer up inspection of the trees within the site. So these, you can just make out here and here, there's a circular area of planting, and then you can make out the larger trees that wrap around that corner of the site. And particularly in this photograph, you can just make out the flats called Parkview. Again, some more photographs of the trees within the site. So this photograph here is taken with the council offices behind me, looking across the site, and you can just make out the back of Tabor House here. This photograph here shows the rear elevation and the window serving the three-story block for number 2 to 7 Parkview. I do have one update, and it was brought to my attention that there was a spelling mistake in one of the reasons for refusal, where it had referred to John J. House rather than John Ray House. So what I'm proposing is that reason for refusal 1 would be updated to... Oh! Are you all right? Reason for refusal 1 would be updated to the text shown on the screen here that relates to John Ray House rather than John J. House. So in terms of a summary, full planning permission is sought for the erection of 29 flats within a 4-storey building with associated access, parking and amenity areas. The proposals would result in a moderate level of less than substantial harm to the significance of Grade 2 listed John Ray House, and a low level of less than substantial harm to Braintree Town Centre Conservation Area, and would also result in harm to the non-designated Tabor House. Further harm is caused by the poor layout and design of the proposals, poor internal amenity for future residents, unacceptable loss of trees, unneighbourly relationship with existing occupiers, substandard parking spaces along with insufficient financial contribution in lieu of on-site affordable housing. There is also a conflict with policy LPP 50. Officers have concluded that the public benefits proposed by the application would not outweigh the harm indicated above, and therefore a recommendation for refusal is made. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm slightly surprised to find myself going first, but I will. Well, we have, in fact, 5 reasons for refusal on this, which is quite a large number, and we don't very often get 5. And I do think they are solid reasons for refusal. The design is, I don't know what to say. It just is not appropriate, as far as I can see, for the site and for the setting, particularly with regard to John Ray House. And there are a couple of other points around the lack of a Section 106 agreement being in place, and I read the representation that came through from Ms Skinner yesterday, and I think it said in there that there was no reason why that couldn't be in place, but the point is it isn't at the moment, and I think we do have an expectation, this committee, that applications like this are going to come with a Section 106 agreed. So I don't accept that point of hers. There's also a point about the design and layout, and the issue of it, is it or isn't it a 3 or 4 story building? It looks pretty much like 4 stories to me. I'm sorry, but it does. There's an awful lot that is not right with this application, and I think it's a pity. I mean, there was pre-app discussion, I think, wasn't there? Yeah. So
yeah, there was one pre-application submission, one meeting, and formal written response was provided.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. So I'm assuming from that the applicant was given, an indication of the concerns that officers had with this, and had an opportunity, therefore, to go away and come back with something that, we might have found, or officers certainly might have found more acceptable. So I think it's a perfectly good report, Melanie, thank you for that. And I am going to agree with officers' recommendation and move refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Spray, does it find a seconder before I move on? Councillor Mann, and then I come to Councillor Abbott. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, this is a sensitive location, and I think there's not only probably heritage harm on the 2 buildings, but it appears to be too large for the setting. I mean, that is the impression. The impression was, in fact, confirmed by the sort of the drawings that were kindly emailed to us by the applicant. It is an imposing building, and I think it impacts on the character of the area in a negative way. To my mind, it's just okay. Summer planning is subjective, but to my mind, it's just too prominent within the park, and I think also it's too close to neighbouring properties, and that would have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of existing relatives. So I think the reasons given for refusal are solid. That's not to say that there's anything against the principle of development on this site, but I don't think this building is suitable.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree with that, and I was very interested in how the debate would go about how many stories it's got. I mean, it's very clear that there's living accommodation across 4 floors, so yes, it's sort of into the roof, but I suppose at the very minimum you'd say 3.75 or something like that. Obviously, I'm concerned about the tree loss, and also the comment made in the officer report that the juxtaposition of the surviving trees is very close to the building, and inevitably you're going to have pressure on those trees once people move in there to have them pruned back or removed. It always raises alarm bells when I see that there's not a separation distance. And I think overall it's just trying to do too much for the space available. And as Councillor Mann said, the principle of development there may be acceptable at some point, but it's not this scheme. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I sort of know the site pretty well, and I'm just thinking about the reasons for refusal, substantial harm, recreational space. I don't know. In a distant memory somewhere, didn't we sell a piece of land or something on the recreation space, and now we're saying there isn't recreation space. There is something about, I'm going to sort of summarise in this in a sec, but there's something about that to me that it's a bit disappointing. And then obviously the design and legal requirements and everything else. But there was a pre-app. And I appreciate that this may not have been fitting for a members' forum, but bearing all that in mind, I'm just quite surprised to see the application in front of us this evening because, you know, there can only be a lack of communication on both sides. Otherwise, it wouldn't be set out in the way it is, you know, because obviously advice was given and then, you know, it doesn't sort of stack up really. So I think the only thing that I'm a bit nervous about is that it could jolly well be appealed and it could jolly well win based on, you know, other appeals that have been won in this district over the last few months. So slightly nervous about that. But I just feel that, you know, in the spirit of the members' forum, and bearing in mind there was a pre-app done, that, you know, this wasn't, you know, it wasn't pulled and we couldn't have tried to sort this out and it could have come back. But, you know, we are where we are. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Did you want to come back on that?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Chris to respond before I go to Council Mrs Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, yeah, just coming back on the point about the pre-application and the engagement point. So, I think there's a point here from me. So, yes, there was a pre-app. As I understand from Mel, it was a single pre-application, and I've got the response sort of printed out for me. So, there were numerous concerns that were raised as part of that pre-application process. It was a standalone pre-application. There was no follow-up, and I think the letter that was circulated to members by the agent yesterday, I think it does refer on the first page to extensive pre-application discussion. So I would certainly challenge that in terms of in terms of the context. I think a scheme of this nature, given the constraints and particularly the heritage issues, warrants extensive pre-application. And certainly as officers, we'd be more than willing to talk about revisions in a revised scheme. And as you'll be aware, obviously, Councillor Beavis, your point about the members' forum, so obviously going forward, schemes increasingly at sort of the pre-application where developers, applicants, agents want to engage with the authority isn't a case of picking and choosing. It will be a case of engaging fully through the pre-application process for major developments within the district, and that will include bringing those proposals in front of members' forum as well. So it may well be a scheme if the applicant agent are serious about looking at the site and actually going away to address the issues and come up with a scheme that is acceptable. We may well see a revised version of this. They may well, if subject to obviously members' decision this evening, you know, obviously the appeal route they can go down. But from my perspective, we've given clear advice to the applicant at pre-application stage. A number of issues were raised, and actually I think the scheme is larger actually than what we considered at the pre-application stage. I think the number of units has actually increased by one, I think. So, yeah, from my perspective, we've had engagement, we've given advice. That advice has not been taken. There was no follow-up discussion from the applicant side. We're presented with an application. We have a statutory duty to determine that application. So that's, I think, where we're at, Councillor Beavis, on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Mrs Parker.
Thank you. I hate to sort of proffer sometimes a different point of view, but I always find design issues are quite difficult to judge, and it is often a subjective point of view. I'm afraid I don't feel quite as strongly as other members on the issue of design. In terms of heritage, I mean, it's really a question for advice from the heritage officer. Obviously, we've been given advice that there is less than substantial harm, but he didn't. The officer, heritage officer, didn't actually give his opinion as to the degree of less than substantial harm. I believe in the his report. So it's one of those. I find issues based on design can be reasons for refusal based on design can be quite subjective. There are, having said that, there are concerns about the loss of trees. There's certainly concerns about the planting amongst the car parking and so on. I was just wondering whether, Chris, as requested by the applicant, we could just whether it would be appropriate to defer the application, or do you think it's time for a completely fresh application? Thank you.
It's already been moved and seconded.
can I ask?
So you would have to put forward an amendment. It's been moved and seconded already that we refuse this.
I don't have a, I just wanted to ask.
Brilliant.
Too late.
Too late. Yes, it's already been moved and seconded. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just very briefly, and Chris, just to make sure I have understood this right, that if we do refuse it this evening and it came back, we could put it through the members' forum. It is a big enough site to put through. Is that correct? Is that what? That was my understanding. So we'd have lots of opportunity. Yes.
So on the basis if members decided to refuse at the site this evening, and then the applicants decided to submit a revised proposal through the pre-application process, it's one that, assuming that they took up to go through that, it's one that would, yes, if they have engagement with officers, it would come through the members' forum as well.
Thank you.
Well, members, it has been moved in a second that we refuse this application this evening. All those in favour of refusal? That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure the agents have heard what we've said. Thank you. It now brings us on to application 220331 for land south east of Hatfield Road, Hatfield Peveril. We have no speakers on this application, so we go straight to the presentation.
No, it's me. It's me. Sorry, it's me again. No, don't panic. Oh, wrong side. Sorry, members, bear with. There we go. Members will be aware, I think, at the last planning committee, Lisa presented an application on an ecological mitigation area, this is the second one before you, followed very swiftly by the third one. This is Area 9, and it is located southeast of Hatfield Road in Hatfield Peveril. The ecological area will include 3 ponds and 12 bunds. A certain area of land will be regraded, and there is also then perimeter fencing and associated landscaping. This is the site location plan for this area. This is the slip road that comes south out of Witham, that always seems to have a set of traffic lights on it. I'm sure probably most of you are aware of it. They seem to be a permanent fixture, but the access is actually the access drive that also serves a commercial kennels called Latney's Kennels, and then the access will run along a section of the farm's the agricultural field, and then opens out into this larger area to the south. And then this is the A12, and then just off of the screen here is where you get the single lane that runs up to Hatfield Peveril, where you can see the gantry sign. There's some photographs of that to come. So this is an aerial photograph of the site. So again, you can make out the slip road here. This is the access driveway that runs down to the kennels here, and then the large area which forms the part of for the mitigation area is to the south here. So this is the site area for Area 9. So you can see we've got 3 ponds in here. There is extensive landscaping proposed across the site, along with a number of individual trees, which are these larger green dots, and then there are certain areas of bunding to then create the various different habitat areas. So this just puts in context particularly the access track. So as the access track would run across an existing agricultural field, there is included both within on this drawing here and also within the construction management plan information of how that access track would be protected should weather become inclement. The text is quite small here, but it does state that there would be suitable ground protection matting laid to ensure that the track doesn't get chewed up if the weather becomes inclement. The next few slides show you cross-sections of the 3 different ponds. So you can see that they vary in size. This first one here, is a maximum depth of 1.7 metres, but you can also see that there are some fairly shallow sections where the pond is going to be fairly flat as well. This is the second pond, so slightly less deep, 1.5 and 1.3 metres deep. And then the third here, again, varies between 1.4 and 1.6 metres in depth. You can also see on here that there is then marginal planting, aquatic planting, reed beds and pond edge grassland that will surround all 3 of the ponds. These are the details for where the bunding will go in. These will become basking banks. We've then also got some log piles within the site. And I've been practicing this word, and I'm sure I'll still get it wrong, hibernacular. That will be, there's a number of those proposed across the site as well. Moving on to the photographs. So there's a mixture of snowy photographs and not snowy photographs. These first few show the site access. So this first one here is looking from the site access up along the slip road towards Witham. This second photograph here is looking down towards where the access track just bends around here, and you would get to the kennels. That's the main entrance. You can see the sign. There is also a public footpath that runs along that access track and then continues on past the kennels. And this bottom photograph here is then looking towards the slip road just before it joins back onto the A12. The next photographs are views from the north, both from the access track and also from the pavement that runs along the A12 slip road. So this will be the access into the site. This bottom photograph here, you can just make out this line of hedging here. That's the core one boundary of the main Area 9 for the mitigation. Again, some further shots from the A12 slip road, so the area would sit broadly here. And the same here in this photograph here. There's one member update in terms of plan drawing numbers listed in Appendix 1. Drawing 315 is listed as revision PO2, and it's suggested that it needs to be changed to drawing 0315 revision PO4. So in terms of planning balance and summary, the principal development is acceptable and the loss of agricultural land has been justified. The access has been considered acceptable. There's no objection from the Highways Authority, and an acceptable construction traffic management plan has been submitted that demonstrates how traffic management would be undertaken throughout the construction period and provides an appropriate management of vehicles, including the prevention of any conflict with pedestrians along the existing public right-of-way. There's no significant ecological constraints, and any impacts can be addressed via mitigation proposed. And the soft landscaping scheme is acceptable, and the biodiversity net gain is supported. Officers consider there's no adverse impact on neighbouring amenity. Taken into above, and it is considered that the proposal complies with the development plan when taken as a whole. And officers consider that there are no material considerations that indicate that decision should be made other than in accordance with the development plan. Therefore, recommendation is for the application to be granted, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1 of the report within your agenda. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out.
Put your microphone on, please.
I'd just like to point out that I have had lots of queries about the traffic lights on that slip road. And perhaps we can make sure that they are kept working properly, because what happens is, because they go wrong, it tails back into Witham, and then it causes a major issue in the middle of Witham with traffic. So I think highways should have to monitor those traffic lights a lot more than they obviously do.
I'm not sure that's within the realms of this application.
Okay.
It doesn't fall within the red line. I was just pointing out as a point of reference in terms of most people know where they would be.
Just it will cause a major
Yeah.
issue when it backs up into Witham.
I think that's a matter for you to take up with your county councillor, Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Right.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for information on the traffic lights, my understanding through talking to National Highways is that the bridge repairs need to be done. But they're taking the view that as the bridge is going to be demolished and the new A12 comes along, they're just going to leave the lights there. And we did say, well, that they've been there, what, 4 or 5 years? They'll be in there another 3 or 4. But that's the explanation I was given.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to need these mitigation areas all along the A12 because actually what hasn't been talked about much is the damage, the environmental damage from the A12 widening is going to be absolutely massive. There are some sections like the one I'm most familiar with, and we've had many conversations with National Highways face-to-face through various forums we've had with them. The losses at Rivenall End of trees is going to be huge. So these areas are going to be really, really important. And obviously I support this application, and it's very interesting that on a site like this we can say with absolute due conviction we're going to get biodiversity net gain. Because we're going basically from an open field to planting and ponds, so there's no doubt about that. The only query I would have is the same point I've made in previous applications this evening, and actually I could have made on all the applications, is there's not enough detail on the trees, so we're not being told what species. I'm assuming they're native, but it doesn't say that. And to evidence the point I made about how opaque the tree reports often are, the slide that the officer showed, that writing, do they have different eyesight to the rest of us? I mean, it was like 0.2 point or something. You couldn't read it there. I doubt you could read it on a screen. I'm presuming that had all the details of the species on it, but it was impossible to tell. But that's my assumption, but maybe if officers could to confirm that. But other than that, I'm happy to move officer recommendation, and yeah, there's something that's got to be done.
Thank you. Third line segment does. Councillor Spear, thank you. Did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm very pleased to see the fact that National Highways are making these mitigating efforts in biodiversity net gain for the widening of the A12. And as Councillor Abbott rightly said, the biodiversity net gain is really important for the potential widening, the soft landscaping, and the fact that it's going to establish a place to move before any widening takes place is really important. So overall, I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Well, it has been moved and second that we grant this application with a change to one drawing. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We now come to the final application this evening. It's application 2203-316 for land south of Cranes Lane, Kelvedon. Where did 315 go, I wonder? We've done 314.
That's to come next time.
Thank you very much indeed. And this is going to be presented by Peter. Good evening, Peter. Down the end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good evening to members. For members' consideration is another of the ecological mitigation areas associated with the A12 NSIP. This one is identified as number 16. It involves similar things. It's 3 ponds, creation of 2 bunds, raising the ground level from on-site excavated material, perimeter fencing and associated landscaping. The location of this site is to the southwest of Kelvedon, similarly on a slip lane feeding onto the A12. It covers just over 4 hectares, including its access. In OS form, as you see here, sort of it's directly to the north, you can see the A12. This site would be accessed from the B1024, which is the slip lane feeding onto the southbound line. To the east of the site, there's more farmland, which eventually leads into the A12 and into Kelvedon itself. In a southerly direction, there's willow plantations and forestry. There is the River Blackwater, which is also the administrative border with Maldon District Council, and beyond that is a couple of dwellings. To the west of the site is a small cluster of buildings, dwellings and agricultural, and beyond that the Essex and Fire and Rescue headquarters. The site is presently classified as Grade 3A farmland, and parts of it fall under flood zones 2 and 3. There are no TPOs on this site, and there's no public right-of-ways running directly through it either. No trees fall within this at the moment. The site is within 300 metres of multiple Grade 2 and Grade 2 star listed buildings. It's Hull Farm, Greenleaves, Ashman's Farm, and there's another one to the south within Maldon. The site is also partially within a heritage asset for archaeology, giving it a non-designated status. The proposed ecological mitigation area is proposed to support the translocation of reptile populations prior to the A12 widening. The scheme consists of 3 ponds, which is more towards the south of the site, 2 bunds up to 1 metre high. There is the regrading of the site as indicated on the northern part. The creation of various reptile features, hypernaculars and log piles, which are dotted throughout. This is the southern part of the site, to Leeds. As indicated for the annotations, there's a lot of landscaping proposed here, including trees and various shrublands. Around the ponds it has its own aquatic landscaping, which is more friendly of that environment. Surrounding the site, a hedging is proposed throughout its entirety, as well as a timber fencing and a metal gate. As in, I think, the other A12 applications, this would not be accessible from the public, and it would be maintained in a similar fashion. Here's the section of the ponds. The deepest is 1.8 metres deep. Some details of the fence, proposed fencing they're proposing, the metal gate, and some of the habitat features. To provide some context of the site, it is on the other side of this bridge as you are going out of Kelvedon. This is the proposed entrance to the site, which you would use an existing access. As in all applications, their construction management plan was submitted. This indicates this existing access and track would be used for works. Up to 15 light vehicles per day are indicated, as well as 6 heavy good vehicles. These would be accommodated on site. Where the delivery and collection of heavy plant is required, temporary two-way traffic lights are proposed. Essex Highways have reviewed this construction management plan and have raised no objection, subject to this being imposed through condition. Here are some more site photographs of the area. This is the view from the access. This is another view from the A12 slip lane as you're sort of looking southwards. This is from the southern edge of the site looking northwards. You can see it slopes downhill slightly. This is a view picture of the nearby dwellings and buildings to the west of the site. And this is sort of looking back upwards towards the A12 and the access track. For members' information, as you may have noted, condition 7, it indicated that there was a pre-commencement archaeology condition. The agent is presently engaging with our consultee to try to address the situation, and other officers are satisfied that this type of condition may not necessarily need to be applied. Officers are therefore seeking delegated authority to adjust the wording of this condition. So if the applicant can provide the required archaeological information that satisfies our consultee, the decision notice can be modified accordingly. To summarise this application, officers are satisfied that there would be no adverse impacts resulting from the proposal. Multiple neighbours were consulted, including the Malden district, and no responses were received. The consultee comments that we have received have given no objections, subject to their associated conditions, which are in the officer report. In terms of the impacts of this, it is outlined that the proposal would have a satisfactory impact with an identified biodiversity net gain from the scheme. While the scheme would be quite visible, especially from the A12 and some nearby public rights of way, it is considered to have an acceptable landscaping impact, and it will be appropriately integrated in landscaping with the hedging. The loss of farmland has been justified and is considered to be policy acceptable. The proposed sequential test is passed a sequential test in accordance with legislation. No adverse heritage impacts have been identified. Given the separation to the nearby dwellings, it's considered there won't be any adverse amenity impacts, especially given the nature of the scheme itself. And no objection has been raised to the proposal from any highways consultee, both locally and nationally. On this basis, this application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in Appendix 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Actually, in this one, Councillor Abbott, it says native trees are going to be planted. And as it's zone 3, they're going to have to be water-loving native trees, aren't they? Right, members. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Yeah, I know this site very well. About 40 years ago, I used to go fishing in the river there, so I know it extremely well. It's sufficient distance back from the A12 for the planting that I'm sure it'll be successful. In between going fishing and this work, I did plant some trees actually when I was doing landscaping work professionally, very close to the A12. And it was 50% soil, 50% crisp packets, basically. Not the best. But no, saying ditto, being serious for a minute, ditto the comments from the previous one, really. It's something that needs to be done. The conversations we've had with National Highways are you sure this is going to be enough? Because although this is showing obviously very clear biodiversity net gain across this area of land, are we going to get it across the piece? Because, as I say, the loss of habitat is going to be extreme, particularly in the Riverhall End area. Basically, almost all the trees you can currently see on both sides of the road are going to go, including some quite large sort of copses of trees. So we are hoping that, well, we're still pressing them, and that's going to be obviously through the DCO process, which we're engaged with at parish level. And on that, very interesting to see that they're proposing to make a start next month, March 2023. So clearly they're both keen to get on. I think for the comments Councillor Swire made, that they need this as translocation areas, but they must be very confident they're going to get the DCO. If they don't, then obviously there's going to be a question mark about what happens to these areas. But anyway, all that is detail, and as it stands, I'm happy to move, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Does it find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strayer. Do you wish to add anything?
Only the same comments as the last one, but happy to see a huge increase in biodiversity in that game. Thank you.
Well, members, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting it? Thank you very much indeed. And you say we've got more of them to come? Yes. Well, members, that brings us to the end of our planning meeting, and I will close the meeting at 9:34 or 3 maybe. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you, officers. Thank you.